Hello, guys, and welcome in another one, English once on the channel. And today's guest is for the, I guess, first time, Mr. John Jewett. Hello, sir.
Hello, Dawid, all of Poland and Europe and listeners. Great to be back. I think this is the third time, so excited to chat some more today.
Yeah, I'm honored that you find some time to hop on for the first time. Just because I was shocked for the first time when you heard about yourself on my podcast. So that was crazy. And now we are seeing each other for the third time. So I'm really honored. Uh, yeah, today's topic is gonna be all about the waste control. And as we all know, you are one of the few out in the pro ranks that's managed to improve on the race control so much that your whole physique basically changed 180 degree. I would say. So I think that's probably you and maybe Ben Pakulski are the two guys that's are suitable for that topic, really, just because there's a lot of guys who sort of improve on the waist, like Nick Walker or even Hadi Schupan managed to do the vacuums right now and stuff like that, but it's not as drastic as your improvements. So for the at the beginning on the podcast, I would like to set the tone of the conversation, just because there's a lot uh, of guys talking about the waste, but we heard a lot of stuff. For example, we heard that someone has a small waist but big guts.
Statystyki podpowiadają mi, że duża część osób oglądających ten kanał wciąż go nie subskrybuje. Dlatego jeżeli należysz do tego grona, zasubskrybuj już teraz oraz wpadaj na naszego Discorda. Link znajdziesz w opisie tego filmu. Zapraszam Cię również do wspierania ruchu Zapierdalać Trzeba poprzez zakupywanie merchu oraz szerowanie, udostępnianie i lajkowanie. Wielkie dzięki i wracamy do materiału.
And I would like to really explain what we are mean when we says that someone has a really small waist. Is it having a small hips, or maybe a ratio through the legs to the shoulders, or maybe it's a flat stomach that makes your waist tight? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I guess when you're saying a small waist now, it is get a bit subjective. Like we don't have a, I guess, clear definition of this is a small waist, but I think when we're saying small waist, we're looking at it in bodybuilding proportions that the shoulder to waist to basically how the legs taper out would give the appearance of a more drastic X frame. I would also think like just part of bodybuilding aesthetics, like a small waist would also be a flat waist that doesn't have any like rounding or protruding out from the sides or from the front. That's kind of how I at least envision that. I think where you see, like you brought up, some guys that have really changed their waist is guys that probably probably didn't focus on it much ever, and so the change is more drastic. That was kind of even myself. Like I've never practiced vacuums ever, and I came from a powerlifting background too, so I had a lot of long duration of time spent with the waist just out. There was like function to a bigger waist, right? Like it's better for bracing and just the structure has to cater into this too. Like let's say your Hadi Chupon is a great example. Like he has decent structure. I mean, he's a Mr. Olympia. He has great structure, but I think he's always had relatively good control. And so for him, it wasn't maybe as drastic because he's already been doing some of that. But for guys like myself or Ben, yeah, from 2017, I got on stage and like, man, doing a vacuum was just barely keeping my stomach flat on stage. And it was exhausting to be on stage because I had to pull so hard the entire time. And I saw this guy next to me. He ended up being doing classic when it came out. But man, his taper insane. I was like, how do I even compete with this? So that year, all I did was like waist work. And it came back 2019 is when I won 212 show, went to Olympia because it was a dramatic change. So back to your question, like yeah, that's how I see small waist is like in proportion because there's guys like I don't have a small waist, but proportionally I control it and with the width and everything, it makes it appearance of small. I mean, you a lot of like your bigger guys, like their waist isn't measured necessarily small, but proportionately, um, it could be there, right? So I think that's an aspect to consider as well.
Yeah, Big Ramy is one of the good examples of that because he for sure not have like a small waist in a I don't remember the words
Yeah, the
circumstance.
circumference, right? Like
Yeah, circumference, yes.
it's gonna
Yeah,
measure
yeah.
big.
But his shoulders so wide and his legs is so big that the waist is appear being really small to the whole body. So the appearance is there for sure. Yeah. Mm, okay,
There's been
so
quite there's been quite a transition these past few years to a large focus on this as well. And I think that's why it's so important. All the feedback from shows that I've gotten were like complimentary on my like waist control, and they're like, get a little bigger, but they're like, do not let your waist change. Like it was such a hard statement, right? And we see that across like all bodybuilders now. Like if you're even in transitions, letting your waist out a little bit, like they dock you very harshly for it. When I think you move into like the early 2000s, we kind of had kind of this mass era where, hey, the waist was there, like it
yeah.
kind of could be overshadowed by the level of muscularity. But now that doesn't fly. And I think it's a good era for bodybuilding. It's like a balance, I think, between aesthetics, condition, and mass all put together with always open. It's going to be a little harder push on size. But I think it's a good middle ground where we found ourselves for bodybuilding.
Do you believe that era of the mass monsters is gone for good?
I guess you can never say for good. I think the era of an unesthetic physique and just mass is likely faded away. I don't think that was ever supposed to be the point around bodybuilding anyway. Um, but honestly, I think we still have a mass monster era when you think about it. Like, how many guys are like close to 300 pounds now?
Yeah, of
Your
course.
stage, like, these are big guys. I think would you almost think that having a small waist, I was listening to another podcaster say like it makes these guys maybe not look as
Yeah,
big as they actually are.
yeah,
Um, but from
yeah,
muscularity standpoint, like I've been next to like the Samsons and the guys that are this large and man they're extremely muscular. So I don't know. You could challenge the idea of like the mass monster era. Like I don't know. We put these guys next to him, like to the current bodybuilders who actually would appear more muscular, right?
yeah. I've met mass monsters like Marcus Rule or
Hey.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, this is like Nasser and stuff like that. So that's what I meant. But back in the days, like you
There's a
said,
freakiness
no
to
one
it, right?
cares. Yeah, no one cares. The Dave Palumbo is probably the best example of that. Back in his days, no one really cares how big your waist is as long as your arms, legs, and back are huge and freaky. So this is the mass monsters that I really remembered. So okay, so please tell me, do you believe that this is not a question that I have on my list, but I just consider just have the idea, but because some guys have a really overgrown obliques, and it's so noticeable that I am not really sure that even the control of the waist could make it better. For example, this is not the best example, but Nick Walker. has some sort of a bigger obliques, and it's really hard to hide for them. The best would be to bring up the Chu Sung. I don't know if you remember this guy. I don't really know if he's competing as a bodybuilder, but his obliques is so big that he has a small waist. He has a
Hmm.
small waist, like a really great taper, but the obliques is just coming out like a, I don't know, like a round of the hat or something like that. It's looking really weird, and some guys have this. Me, for example, I have really big obliques. And do you think that you can do really something about that?
I think to a degree, I think we should probably like maybe pull back a bit and look at like what are all the variables that contribute to the waist, and then we could kind of shoot down maybe each one as we go. But something you're bringing up as well with this is that we can't change our structure, like bone structure, right? Like someone like Nick, that he has a larger rib cage but also wider hips. Like you're gonna have like the obliques that are gonna attach at those points. So you can't really change that width. I mean, there's a degree of being able to control the transverse abdominis to pull in because that muscle wraps horizontally around the entire abdomen. So you could control it to bring it in, but how much more could you bring it in out inside of the rib cage and the hips? And we don't really see that really happen. It can kind of come in line. So structurally, I think you're always going to be limited by your bone structure. The guys that have these really great tapers, think of a Keon, a bigger rib cage, but a very small hip structure. So when he vacuums, like it creates this concave shape that we see. But um, yeah, guys with those type of structures, it'll always be limiting to the point
Yeah.
of like development though. And just to hit like the overall aspects that are going to contribute here to the waist and how we see waist size change is for one, just hypertrophy of the musculature around it, right? Rectus abdominis, we have the internal and external obliques. Even the spinal erectors will contribute to your waist size, but that's kind of in a positive way, right? So we have development of these, but all the internal structures within the waist too that we have to consider. Which, what about adipose tissue around the organs? So we have visceral fat gain changes that could occur. That's going to increase waist size as well. Then we have all the organs to consider too and their growth and development over time. And then beyond that too is just the untrained waste, just time spent with untraining the TVA and how that stretching over time might impact waist size. And what are all the influences to this is training, drugs, and digestive and gut health. So I think that this kind of summarizes all the things that we should be thinking about when we are trying to improve our waist and in areas where we should like kind of go maybe one by one and see what is the input here and how does it influence it. And we could start with training since you bring it up.
Yeah, I've got a question that you basically cover right now. What's the real cause, in your opinion, of waste overgrowth? I would say, but we can I have it all also separated as like a training, diet, PEDs, GH,
Okay.
insulin, abs training, and stuff like that. But first of all, do you believe that wearing a belt or a waist trainer could really be a tool that helps to some sort of shrink your waist? And first of all, do you believe that you can literally shrink your waist?
Yeah, I don't believe in being able to necessarily shrink the waist. I think controlling the waist. And what is shrinking the waist? Like, right, if you say you lost visceral fat, yeah, you absolutely could shrink the waist. So I think we're saying like what actual changes could we have that would be more on the permanent lines? I think with the like the waist trainers, the way that they're implemented isn't it going to make be very impactful? And I've heard some people say that they're like it keeps them mindful to like keep their waist kind of pulled in. But I think a lot of people, you come on, you wear them and you just explode out of them. Like you're not really controlling the waist. So the idea to train the waist, it's not really training the waist. Like we want to actually be able to pull in and contract the TVA and have that control. That's true, like waist training. So with how someone's going to wear one, maybe just while they train, like you wear your belt and that's it just for the hour, like that's not going to be impactful. And even then, like the bracing that you do, or like you do create some intra-abdominal pressure for during training and push out into the abdomen. If you're doing that correctly, it won't be full blown like you're trying to like look like you're pregnant, right? It should be a middle ground to that. So I don't think that's part of what's contributing to waist size increase. I think it's more of this 24-hour period of what is occurring throughout the day. And so that goes to say, oh, well, you should wear a waist trainer. But yeah, I think that leads to it's like it's not really helping you actually train the waist. So I wouldn't put weight into that. I think there's bigger ticket items that we should focus on before those.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start from the training. Do you believe that certain movements or the type of training, for example, like a high intensity or maybe like a typical strength training, could cause waist overgrowth?
So basically, the bigger you get, potentially the bigger your waist is absolutely going to get to a degree. Like I'm still yet to see someone that went up from like 180 to 260 of stage weight and not have their waist changed. Like it
Yeah,
has to, even in naturals, this is going to happen. Even organ size increases in naturals. There was a study in collegiate football players looking at their weight gain over, I think it was the duration of a year, looking at organ size change, and their organs increased in size. Basically, if you're a bigger human, you need bigger everything, like bigger
yeah,
heart, bigger digestive tract. So even in naturals, this occurs, but in enhanced bodybuilders, like we can go way beyond this. So everything's going to increase in size. But with regard to actual the musculature around it, if you are doing, lifts that are very well suited for hypertrophy, you absolutely would hypertrophy those muscles. So I think whether you should train the abs or not depends on what your abdominals look like to begin with. So I wouldn't overly advise doing like weighted ab work if you have really good abs when you diet down. Because if you are doing, and I would advise if you are going to be doing this training, is weighted training within the hypertrophy range for abs, but just training the rectus abdominis, just your abdominal muscles in that sagittal plane. So just sternum to pelvis to limit loading the obliques. However, the obliques they run at these diagonal lines, right? They still contribute in trunk flexion. So you're still going to load them a bit to a degree, even if you're doing weighted crunches or some type of reverse crunch. So it's something to consider in that. And they could hypertrophy. What I would really advise against would be doing like a weighted like side bends or rotational work that progressively load in the hypertrophy ranges as you absolutely would grow your obliques. And I had a client, this was several years back, and he did a lot of heavy side bend work, weighted, and man, his obliques stayed thick, and they never came back down because the maintenance of that level of muscularity is very easy. So
yeah.
once you get there, it's hard to atrophy those muscles.
Yeah. Do you think that something like side planks could grow your obliques, or is it more like a strengthening exercise just because there's no, like a concentric and centric part of motion, so it's basically less impactful when it comes to the hypertrophy, let's say like that.
Yeah, I guess to challenge it would be like, would you grow your quads with doing a wall squat?
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, right. So we know isometric contractions are not the best for hypertrophy as you need like contractile movements through the eccentric and concentric. So I think like plank work, side plank work, I think the benefits far outweigh any small contribution that I might have to growth because one thing as bodybuilders that I see occur a lot of injury wise around if you're having like quad tears or knee issues, is that we are very much these, we call ourselves athletes, sagittal plane athletes, right? We do squats in this plane, we bench press, we pull, like
Yeah,
nothing lateral. So a lot of us get very weak side to side and weak with spinal control and bracing the core. So like weighted, like not even weighted, just body weight plank work. Like, man, I shake after just 20 seconds of doing a plank, and that's part of my weakness. So I think isometric work and doing planks is a greater benefit than a detriment. And we, like I said, it's an isometric contraction, so it's not going to be very contributory to muscle hypertrophy.
great. Yeah, since you sent me the core exercise video that you put out for me, I've skipped it maybe 3 or 4 times since that day. So this is why I asked, just because I'm doing it constantly
What
every day.
have you noticed anything from that as far as like,
To be honest, no, no, and even not being like a stronger in that. I've almost every day I feel like I start all over again. It's
okay.
yeah, it's basically I've I've not progressed at all at it. And I've also do the side planks in my ab routine, which I probably change because I do like reverse leg raises, crunches, and then the side planks, every other training. But as you said, that might be not beneficial for me, maybe. So maybe I'm gonna change it just to the regular planks and the side planks. That probably gonna be better for me, as my abs are very thick. So I probably don't need to train it more. Yeah.
Like a point around the side plank is like when I do mine, like I can notice a discrepancy in like my left side is really weak compared to my right side, and my left side is where I have a lot of my injuries in my leg that have happened. So like trying to improve that area, and I have to get away. Yeah.
Yeah, I am just in the big three McGill, I haven't seen any progression. But if the waist control that you recorded for me, I've seen a huge difference,
Oh, good.
especially after when I pose after doing this routine. I feel like I have full control on my apps. Like I can do whatever I want. So that's a great, that's a really great tool to actually keep in your waist. But my vacuum is not improved almost at all. But this is probably just because I am right now in the off season. So every day I'm waking up a little bit fuller, and it's a little bit harder to suck it in and stuff like that. So this is probably it. And also I've struggled a little bit with my digestion. For it's most of the time it's good, but sometimes I don't know why it's just feel inflamed. I've waiting for the results of the gut microbiome uh, I don't know how to say it in English, but I've do the checking for the microbiome if it's something wrong out of there. So probably like a probiotic therapy or something. It could be like useful for me. But I will see if nothing's gonna happen out of this. I'm gonna do the colonoscopy and probably maybe the other
Endoscopy.
side, yeah,
Yeah.
endoscopy, yes, 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 and stuff like I'm gonna searching for the true cause of it, just because it's I don't know why, but I am sometimes I've I've cleaned my diet to the almost zero. I've not even using any sweeteners and stuff like that. Even my supplements, I've have natural taste without any sweeteners and stuff like that. The only thing that have some sort of sweetener is EAAs, just because unflavored EAAs is. I am not that crazy. I am not that regimented.
Yeah.
It's
I know.
just yeah, it's not gonna happen. But other than that, I skip everything like that could potentially cause some problems, like a bread and stuff like that. So yeah, so 99 times my digestion is perfect, but I am still, even though I have not so much food for me, like a 4,000 calories on the training days and 3,000 on the non-training days, my stomach is like bloated. I don't know why. It's very weird. Yeah, but what can I do? I just can wait for the results and
Well, well, let me finish out the training piece
yeah,
so the listeners have that because you mentioned something important and what I feel as well is like the biggest thing that you can do to change your waist on stage is going to be like learning to control it with abdominal vacuum work. And that's what really changed mine the most too is all off season long like what I told you was fast in the morning when you're at your emptiest, doing like 10 sets to start with of holding abdominal vacuum as long as you can, which to do them basically, right? Like ex blowing out all your air and basically trying to pull your abdomen in like your belly button to spine basically. And through that is where you'll feel your biggest impact into what your point you brought up is that off season when I was doing them, like it wasn't pulling in that much. But once I got back into prep, like I had the connection of how to do it, and with less food and my waist is shrinking because from dieting, that's when I could start really, really pulling deep vacuums and could keep training that process even more. So that's when I really saw it carry over. So I think training wise, that's like the number one tool to use to actually bring in your waist and have it show different on stage. But what we talked about earlier is that's not changing a relaxed waist size. Like if I relax, like I still have like my obliques are kind of like rounded over a bit over my hips, and like I still have like a rounded abdomen in the front. And so I still have to be very mindful because it hasn't changed over how my natural abdomen has stretched over time. And again, it's been like this since I was in early college, before even using steroids or anything like this. I think just the genetic component around my waist and hip size. I was a powerlifter, so that's I have a
yeah.
structure as well to do well in that. But also like I think the bigger other one we need to talk about is what you're bringing up is digestion as a big impactor. I think PDs are a lesser impact than what some people think, but it's interrelated with digestion too.
Okay, so let's finish the training part just because some people gonna for sure ask of that. Are deadlifts gonna grow your waist? Are squats gonna grow your waist? And probably heavy bend over rows. And probably everything that you have to support yourself with your core. Do you believe in that?
Uh, to I think it's to a far lesser degree than if you were to do like weighted side bend work, because even in like these lifts, they are um, relatively isometric contractions to just brace the core. However, it's not really all isometric. You're still moving around and it's a lot of load. So it would, but I think for if you require those lifts, like the offset of growing your quads or these other body parts would probably still improve your taper. But I think once you got to an advanced enough level, most of these lifts you kind of have to move to a more brace pattern anyway, because for like safety or even
Okay.
uh, you're not even able to like target the quads as much as you want with a squat. It's just like no, it's just like my back and my whole body is just kind of totally fucked. I need to move to like a hack squat. So I think the natural progression of bodybuilding, you kind of have to move to a more brace pattern. A point that I would bring up, and again, we could bring up examples of people, and it's just cases of one, but I think the physique that is the standard of aesthetics, you could argue is Chris Bumstead,
Yeah.
and he's squatted and deadlifted for the majority of his career until the later times when he hasn't, because I think a neck issue. But the guy can squat, deadlifts over 600 pounds, and he doesn't have a big waist. I think if you have a genetic propensity already for a large waist, it might be highlighted more. But it's usually the guys that are just already structured like that are going that direction no matter what as they get bigger. I think it's a small contributing factor.
You know what I think put a most impact on your obliques? Like a single arm rows, like
Yeah.
hammer rows, or anything that's not chest braced. Just because I have a tendency to target my obliques really easily, and sometimes when I do the heavy, like a barbell, single arm barbell row, like a middle rows, or dumbbell row, or like a standing hammer rows, or even sometimes sitting hammer rows, when you're trying to put the your whole body into it. Sometimes the next day I feel a soreness in my obliques. So this is the definitely indicator of working them really hard. So that's what I think, because this is like a twisted movement. So it's basically like your obliques.
It
Yeah.
is obliques, right?
Yeah.
Which what's gotten so popular too is all the single arm work.
Yeah.
You have people doing all the single arm lat rows, like it's like all oblique contractions or single arm row work, which I think if you can have something to counter that anti-rotation, like with the other arm and your chest supported, like that would be a better improvement to that. But if you're just doing like a single arm, like cable or dumbbell without a brace, like yeah, it could bring a lot of oblique into it for sure.
Yeah, Nick Walker actually have a great video where how he's showing how he's rowing, and his dumbbell rows looks like totally different than the other guys, because he puts his like for example, if he gonna roll with a right hand, he gonna put a right foot in front of him just to create a stability, that because most of the guys would do the opposite, and they
Mhm.
are trying to counteract, like you said, the rotation, and Nick's doing it like very, very smart. So I've always sent the link with this to my guys who have like a problem with one arm dumbbell or something like that, because it's really, really, uh, first of all, really great way to isolate your lat with rowing movement, even though this is not probably the best lat like a movement. There are better, far better than that, but yeah, this is a great tip for those guys who struggle with activations of their obliques within the rowing.
I do my best with like trying to use like I prefer like bilateral patterns for pulling and rows because man, when you have a day with like even two single arm, it's like doing double the sets.
Yeah,
And I try my best to like find a good machines where I can do like a chest supported two arm like row or pull down. And then if I'm gonna do single arm, if you're someone with limited equipment and you're gonna do the single arm dumbbell row, I would try to put that later in the session to where it's a little bit fatigued, so maybe you don't need as much loading either,
yeah,
versus
that's
earlier
smart.
on.
Yeah, definitely smart idea. Okay, so diet is probably the most important thing when it comes to your waist size. So what do you think about the diet in general, and your like a statement of on that topic when it comes to the waist? We're gonna talk mostly about the meal size, the digestion, and probably the selection of foods, just because some guys have a tendency to overeat on the fiber and stuff like that. So that's probably have its impact as well. So yeah, you can right start.
Yeah, I think a lot of these problems start cropping up. I think it's hard to not talk about the liver, um, with the digestive tract in mind. And there's so many connections we found with the gut in its emerging research with the gut thyroid axis, or the gut brain axis, and the liver gut axis. Like all these things are connected. So, affect one, if you're treating one poorly, like it could affect this whole system in turn. Yeah, I guess at least along the lines with like enhanced bodybuilding is we could be running programs that could be more strenuous than the liver, which the liver being important for just digestion as well, metabolism of our micronutrients. So and macronutrients. So it's important to like address the gut and make the liver and make sure that you are like in line with proper like liver health, which that's why I'm like in the off season, at least proponent if you're using PDs is trying to limit the use of orals.
Yeah.
As that would just cause more could cause more bile backup and cholestasis in the liver. That's when you see like digestion really slow down as well. And I find that these guys too have more problems with managing estrogen because in the liver, a lot of your hormones are metabolized there. So the estrogen is conjugated in the liver and then excreted into the GI tract. Well, there's a deconjugating enzyme in the bacteria that could deconjugate estrogen and cause it to re-enter circulation. So when you have like poor liver and digestive health, like you could have very high estrogen levels, and then it's kind of a vicious circle because we also see higher estrogen slows down digestion too. So now it's like more impact on this whole system as a whole. So like supporting like liver health could even help with and gut health, even with lowering your estrogen and allowing you to tolerate the testosterone that maybe is starting to become impactful in the off season when you're getting fatter and your food volume's higher and things are slowing down. It could be one thing to consider in that. But yeah, it's why at least like the use of like orals in the off season, I would say be limited, and then having your support supplements already there to support these processes of phase one, phase two elimination liver, like N-acetylcysteine. I do like sulforaphane as well. Helps with the phase two detox of the enzymes, which that's that conjugation and what leads to elimination of these hormones. And then TUDCA, I think, is one. I have like every guy that I have on TUDCA to improve bile flow, which is the main issue you see with like oral steroid use and just steroid use in general. So
You're
um,
running Tutka year round?
yeah, I do.
What
Like
dose?
I lower my dose down like for times that gears
250?
are elevated. So I'll do 750 milligram always year
Ooh,
round, and then I'll elevate to 1500 milligram when gears like moved up.
okay.
And man, I've never had like liver enzymes, things like those. Like they're so much lower. Like doing that aspect, especially guys that's more problematic with.
Yeah,
Um,
in your last video, you talk about the liver and the blood works. Is probably worth to notice that, the pinpoint that like liver enzymes itself, it's not the best indicator of the liver, just because this is just a indication of how your liver works. So through the weight training and stuff like that, through the diet, it's gonna be slightly elevated. So for bodybuilders having like a 20 points over the norm or something like that, this is our norm, guys. So don't be scary about that just because I have many guys who just wanted to do crazy liver detox and stuff like that because their doctor says that they probably gonna have to do a transplant or something like that because their liver is almost dead and stuff like that. So yeah,
yeah, definitely not. Like my liver enzymes just kind of stay in the hundreds,
yeah.
which is 3 to 4 times normal, which all other markers around like liver completely normal. So it's more training related. So you're absolutely right as far as that goes. Um, as far as like from the liver though, I think scoping back a bit, I think there's just some really big items that you need to address in bodybuilders that impact the GI tract. For one, sleep. Sleep and stress are huge. And we see like, elevations in cortisol. Cortisol has direct impacts on the gut and can lead to more like issues that lead to like these more serious GI, like intestinal permeability, inflammation in the gut. So just trying to make sure like you keep stress low. And what I mean is total allosteric load, physiological stress, not just someone yelling at you stress, but
Yeah.
everything in the body. So when you're on high PEDs, high food, high body weight, and you're not getting a lot of sleep, or you also have the mental stress as well, like all of this starts to take toll on digestion. And some of the guys that I have had the worst digestive problems with are the ones that have like the more strenuous schedules or more variability in their schedule too. Like especially like shift workers um, have like so much variance in like their issues with GI function, or just the guy that stresses and has a little bit like less sleep that night, the next day like he's more bloated. So if you have a whole off season where you're in this environment, like digestion will be taking a toll. And so this is just the basic component to make sure to optimize digestion. And I know we a lot of times want to jump into like, should I take my betaine HCl or my glutamine? And like, no, like you're not even doing the basics, you know? Like that's where it has to come first. Like an easy one, have a set sleep and wake time every night, bed and wake at the same time, and then set your room up for success for sleep. And then you need downtime during the day to relax and wind down as well. Just those little easy things to implement could go a long way for digestion.
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed that just because I still have, I even though I'm almost 8 weeks post show, I still my sleep is shit. My sleep is shit, but that's probably because I'm still very lean, and this is probably the biggest cause of that. But sometimes I sleep like a 4 to 5 hours tops, so it's really poor. It,
Here we
I've
go, Dylan. There's your thing to fix.
Yeah, probably, yeah, because I I've used sleep medications 3 to 5 times a week just to if I have like a two shitty sleeps a row, I've gonna shoot something for to knock me down to have like a to just maybe improve the 2+ hours or something like that adds to my rest time or something like that. I have the Aura ring and it's most of the time it's below 60, the sleep score. So the highest score I have 81.
Okay.
So that's really shitty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for me too, like I stay pretty lean year round, but even like post show, I thought I got to a point where I felt recovered. Like I'm good for off season, but then I start getting a little fatter as I'm in my push phase now. It's like, oh, my sleep's better. Like I'm still wasn't fully recovered, but now with my gear going higher, sleep's kind of taking a detriment again. And we know like just androgens in general are like increased sympathetic drive and also skew like a lot of neurotransmitters that are supportive for sleep. Then it's the management of estrogen too, because I think some guys are letting estrogen just go kind of run wild.
Nah.
And that's estrogen's also like excitatory and can impact your sleep too. So it's like, man, trying to really find the sweet spot with your hormone and cycle setup. That's also why I still like to like titrate up a little slower into push phases because I have guys that like week one is like 2 grams of gear, right? Or whatever. They're like, man, like I have reflux and like my sleep shit. It's like, yeah, just increase it up just a little bit. Take a couple weeks just to get there, and it can make it the transition a little smoother to a higher hormone environment. But I think, yeah, if gear's getting too high and your sleep takes too much of a detriment, it's kind of like the benefit is no longer the benefit, right?
Yeah, but I'm still on the lower dosages right now. So yeah, my coach is very knowledgeable. So he know what he's do. So yeah. But I probably should get some fatter at least. In a few weeks, it probably is gonna be happen just because the weight is creeping up, even though on the low calories I had, or probably it's not that low because I have a one cheat meal a week, so it's probably a little bit more if you counted it, just because the cheat meal day is probably over 500 calories than normally would eat or something like that. But when it comes to the diet, do you think that the meal size, the meal portion, is a big indication? Just because we see those guys like Wesley Wizards. I don't know if you saw any of his. full day of eating video, but the guy eats like at least half of the kilo of veggies a meal, at least like a 1.5 liter of cream of rice because he adds at least a liter of water to 150 to 200 grams of cream of rice, plus 300 to 400 grams of fruits, plus some chocolate, plus some peanut butter and stuff like that. So the meal is probably over 2 kilos at least. So do you? But and he still managed to kept his waist really small.
Yeah, I think for I've seen it vary, right? Because I have some guys that are on pretty high food volumes, and man, they look like they're distended all day long. But then I have one client right now. He eats 8,000 calories a day. Shit you not, it's 1,100 grams of carbs, and his waist stays so small. I even had a classic guy at the Olympia 2 years ago, and out like per meal, it was like 500 grams of rice. It's like it's so much food. Then I look at him like, damn, like you can still vacuum. Like, how is that possible? So I think for some people, they have great digestion and they're not as impacted with certain food choices, while others are. And so we can get into that a bit. I think the one thing that I would kind of look at first around trying to improve the diet when someone's having problems, and that we see a lot in bodybuilding, is if we see the really high protein takes, which we're kind of circling back to our first talk we ever did, higher protein takes, lack of variety in food, so the same foods for a long period of time, then also lack of fruit, veggies, and fiber. Now, like you said, it could get extreme. That's a different thing. But these typical bodybuilding diets a lot of times can lead to like the problems in turn, because we see like more variety in food can create more variety in the microbiome, which could be a positive thing. The research is really earlier on of what does that even mean to have like microbiome diversity and which bacteria do you want in different amounts. Like some people are trying to put out information of like they already know, but the
Yeah.
research isn't quite there yet. But we just kind of have like this big picture look at, hey, when you're eating a variety of fruits, veggies with fiber in it, like overall, this contributes to less GI disease and disorders. That's kind of like where at least I've seen the research at. But to the diet construction point, that's kind of what I would look at for a diet that would be supportive of digestive health. And when we say like gut health, I'm referring to like the gut without any type of uncomfortable functional disorders, right? Like reflux or uncomfortable bloating, diarrhea, constipation, like ones that have like proper bowels, which would be you could look at the Bristol stool chart. It's like seven different types of bowel movements you can have, and with like the middle one, it's like at a four kind of you could get some visual ideas of like if you're having the right type of bowel movement per day. That could give somebody good idea if you're actually having GI issues or even not. If you feel great and you're like sometimes eat a food, I feel a little gas and bloating. Like that's normal to eat foods and have some gas and a little
Yeah.
bloat, but when it's to an excessive extent and uncomfortable, that's when it's problematic. But yeah, but anyway, we're circling back. I think the big thing here is like I first look at protein intake. Because for one, protein stimulates the G cells in the stomach to secrete gastrin, and then gastrin increases the hydrochloric acid from the parietal cells in the stomach. So when you have guys where they're getting lots of reflux, this is the most common thing I see in guys is upper GI issues in the off season, causing a lot of like bloat or could have reflux. Is the first thing I would look at would be protein because it's the macronutrient with more the direct impact on stomach acid. And so just lowering protein down can make a big impact in that. Um, if you want to look at even research, there's a study with looking at like it's like close to 2 grams per pound of body weight of protein. All the subjects in the studies were had the worst like bloating and complaints of gas and things with this high protein intake. So it is one thing where we could move that down and really improve digestion pretty quickly just with that alone. Um, And then from there, uh, Other foods, I think you get into like the reflux issue foods when we get like real high fat, which we don't really do that in bodybuilding, so I don't see that being a problem. I see it more of an issue of like if you're having guys that are and not like you, Dawid, sounds like your cheat meals are pretty controlled, but when they're getting real excessive in a cheat meal on the weekend, where it's like 1,000, 2,000 calories over, and that kind of bleeds into the next day, and food won't digest as well because they're still trying to digest the food from the night before, and then that throws them off for the week. So I think controlling like your caloric surplus and having it more stable throughout the week, it would be like a positive thing to have. As far as like size of meals though, I do think it's important to consider because if you're just filling the waist all day long and you're letting these high volumes actually distend the belly, that's where I run into issues and not being able to control my waist and pull it in and actually do my vacuums. So I'm not able to train my waist to the small it can go. And if you spend all off season long like that, over time, it absolutely could increase. And I think this is the number two like thing to control to bring your waist in. First one, do abdominal vacuum work, but number two, have like choose foods and structure your diet to where you can keep your waist as small as possible throughout the off season.
Yeah, definitely. And I will have to agree with you on the protein because my coach is right now is reduced my protein a lot. I've basically have like a 340 grams of protein, but counted from the old sources.
Okay.
Yeah, because I have I've stolen a spreadsheet from you and make it like I and make it my diet that I have basically the same food every day. Obviously, I've changes the fruits and the veggies, but everything is diversified. So I not repeated any of the protein sources a day because I have also 5 meals right now, not 6 meals. And my meals is spreads over 3 to 4 hours. So I've eat a meal, I've pretty much almost empty to the next meal, and then I eat it, and it's basically my digestion is best in the years right now. So this is like a very, very good tool to have. I still believe that the lower protein is probably not contributing to the most amount of mass growth because I still believe that if you bump it up the protein, you probably could build a little bit more. But for now, my goal is not to build as much mass as I possibly can, but putting it on the right places and keeping my waist tighter because this is the feedback from the judges that my weight control is not the best actually. So yeah, yeah, but I have to agree with you on that. So definitely we can back to the first podcast, and I am
Yeah.
agreeing with you. So
I'll keep trying to work on you on like you can still grow. If I add like 10 pounds of stage weight again this year on my actually my protein's not terribly low, but um, we'll see, I guess, what happens with
yeah,
that.
I saw your comparison, and it was crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go well. You brought up a really good point too, and I've done this off season too, is move from 6 meals to 5 meals because I with 6 meals a day, you just have those 2 meals somewhere in the day that just kind of get on top of one another, and I like having a rather have a little larger meal, but time for the meal to actually digest before like another meal is getting put on top of it. So I find more benefit in doing it that way.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm still so hungry between the meals. That's having 5 meals for me is so much mental battle. I've drink 4 to 5 like a decaf caffeine a day just to keep uh, my head in a right place because I'm so hungry that basically hour after hour, sometimes 15 minutes after I eat a meal, and it's decent meal because it's like a 300 grams of veggies, 100 grams of rice, raw weight rice, and 250 grams of raw whey meat. and 15 minutes later, I feel like my stomach hurts because it's empty, like you had low sugar. Something like that, like you go in hypo hungry, something like that. So yeah, my digestion is my maybe not digestion because it's not digestion, but like a stomach emptying. It's real sped up right now, and it's hard hard to keep the diet in check. To be honest, I never felt that before in my entire life. Never had problem with sticking with the diet, and I'm still sticking to it, but it's so mentally hard on me.
Well, it's a good and a bad thing. For one, I think having hunger in the off season is a positive before meals, and you're
Yeah.
able to keep your waist as small as it's been, but you don't want it to be like you're still feeling post show, which it sounds like you're still probably too lean with that ravenous of hunger and sleep, issues, which probably still why you run into some
Yeah,
some
but
gut
I'm
issues.
but I'm still managed to add almost 20 pounds.
20 pounds up from stage weight.
Yeah. Was 102 on stage, and right now today I wake up, I was 111. So it's 9 kilo points, like you have to multiply by 2.2, it's around 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it takes a little more potentially, I'm sure you've gotten heavier right in the off season where that. I mean, I guess we'll find out right when.
I'm not chubby type of guy. If not bodybuilding, I would probably be a professional eater on the YouTube, but no, not those like Birdman Food who's lean a whole year, but more like those fat couples that's sitting whole day and eats something like that. Like Nick Avocado or something like that. I don't really remember the name of the guy, but I would probably look like that. Yeah, it's getting darker out here, but I can't stand up to put out the lights. So most of the people probably listen,
And if you
not
can turn a light
watching.
on, go for it. But I was like, why is it so dark over there now? Yeah.
Waiting for my wife to come and, and put the lights on. Yeah, but what do you think about the PED use when it comes to the waist size? And obviously, the using of the orals is going to be impactful just because it's going to directly impact on your even on your stomach acid and stuff like that. So it's
Yeah.
probably gonna mess up with your digestion a lot. But injectables seems to be a little bit safer in that regards, but it's still a stressor to your body. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. With waist size, I mean, for one, the digestive piece is probably the more important one, I think, that contributes. And like you mentioned, like testosterone alone can increase like gastric acid secretion, which is another influence just to potential for acid reflux and also for increasing like different interleukins that can cause inflammation, TNF alpha, with then also contributing to, Dr. Dean kind of brought this to bay, like with androgen receptors on the mast cells of the immune system and causing more histamine release, which histamine can have impactful also for increasing like stomach acid too. Then if you have high estradiol, that could slow gastric emptying. So this combination of like food sitting longer with more stomach acid, I think that's more problem than like someone not having enough stomach acid in the off season. But yeah, when you're in a situation with high food and PED use, like the occurrence of acid reflux is the very potential with also contribute poor sleep in high stress situations. But all of that together can definitely impact like your ability to digest food and make you more distended throughout the day. And that environment too is like, well, what do I guys do in that case? Well, we take PPIs, we take antacids, which like we see like antacids can increase risk of lower GI issues. Um, like SIBO. Some people bring up SIBO, like this dysbiosis of the gut. So now you're suppressing stomach acid because you're getting reflux, and that over time for long periods could lead into more like of the lower GI problems. Then we have a lot of drugs that we take too. Others other than steroids that impact the GI tract, uh, blood pressure medications, erectile dysfunction meds, the nitric oxide increase. It relaxes the lower esophageal sphincter, so that doesn't close as tightly, so you can get more acid to come up and have more reflux. Some guys are taking NSAIDs, which also could uh, lower the ability to buffer stomach acid and protect the lining of the stomach. So now you might have more chance of like ulcer formation. Statins, if you're using those, like it cause GI distress, or guys are metformin, which metformin it affects the microbiome like for good or bad. Hard to say, but nonetheless, some guys have like some bloating using metformin. So we have even other drugs combined with the steroids that we use that are impacting digestion. So I would want to kind of go through the list of what medications someone might be taking, and if they're seeing a lot that's compounded together, trying to use alternatives or resolve those issues to where we won't need those type of medications anymore. But that's what I would be addressing. Then also dietary wise, making sure you have fiber, fruits and veggies, lower body weight. So I think this is just an easy one where, a lot of times we just push body weight too high, or we run drugs designs that just make you hold an extra 10 pounds of water when it's
Yeah.
not really like like contributing toward what we really want in bodybuilding, right? Which if you had 10 pounds off of water from you, like you're gonna sleep better, you're gonna perform better, and you'll have better digestion as well too. Um, I would also be looking for like trigger foods too. That would could be contributing to reflux, like chocolate or spicy foods. Seasonings are a big one in bodybuilding that kind of go unnoticed. Like stuff with like a lot of garlic or onion in it
Yeah.
can cause like a lot of guys bloating. They're adding new seasonings in, or even using if you're hungry in the off season, you drink a lot of carbonated drinks, cause more bloating, or water flavoring too, as an issue for me with citric acid. They all add citric acid in or malic acid because it stimulates thirst, makes you want to drink more, buy more product, but it's a contributor to reflux. And another
A
thing
lot
that
of
stinks,
sodium as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
and high sodium can be a gastric irritant, which and another one I see like some guys are still smoking or vaping in bodybuilding, which could contribute to reflux. So, but anyway, I kind of went on a tangent there to your point around like making the waist big. These things around digestion are important, right? But as far as like making like organ size increase or visceral fat gain, it's we see in bodybuilders that there is a higher proportion of visceral fat gain versus subcutaneous body fat, and that's largely due to the high androgen environment and low estrogen. I think it displays well in like women that are approaching menopause, or even women with PCOS, where you see that like really vast
Yeah.
hormone shift,
Hormonal shifts. Yeah.
and you see them having, or like the masters level female competitor with the kind of the round belly. You think you see a pretty big shift into visceral fat gain, but they stay really lean. So I think the androgens play a big role in the fat gain piece. And that's why I think it's important just like keeping metabolic health and doing all these things that we're talking about could help limit that, and why we don't want to get overly fat in the off season because you absolutely still are gaining visceral fat. As far as like, everyone calls it GH gut, which the interesting thing around growth hormone is when you see someone with like acromegaly, like growth hormone excess, is that they don't really have those issues. They don't have like
Yeah.
necessarily large organ like stomach growth or intestine growth or high amounts of visceral fat gain. Actually, when you have growth hormone deficiency syndrome and they give you growth hormone, it actually improves visceral fat. But that is at a physiological replacement dosage. In the excess amount, you could get insulin resistance when we see like the studies with athletes giving them a lot of growth hormone. That doesn't really happen because they're doing
Yeah.
all the right things to stay insulin sensitive. But what I would say, and what we don't have research on, is that if you're not doing all those things, right, like you're getting excessively fat, you're having like large fluxes in calories with big cheat meals, um, steroid use combined with growth hormone use, you absolutely could see like a greater shift towards insulin resistance. We see it happen. And with that, we're seeing more visceral fat gain and more inflammation occur in the body too, which that will make the waist bigger in turn. I think the actual like organ size increase, it could happen, but I think that's the slow thing that happens over time, like high amounts of growth hormone, but not the acute things that we're seeing because we're seeing a lot of guys that they change their waist back. So I think it's more of like training the waist and the digestive side versus really the drug side. But the drug side can absolutely lead to problems.
Okay, so we can scratch the GH just because it's basically go out of way. It is not the main problem of your big guts, the use of GH. But what about insulin? And this is the last question for today, just because I wanted to release you as quick as possible because we are over an hour. But the insulin, because this is a tricky one. A lot of guys like pants that the use of the insulin is the cause of their like a waist overgrowth. For example, Fu Arabiat, for example, Jordan Peters says that after he's using a lot of insulin, his waist grew a lot. But is that insulin or the old protocols that you are basically feeding the insulin, not using the insulin to counteract the use of a lot of GH and like a lot of dietary carbs?
I think you already answered it, right? That's my thought as well, is that insulin is not why guts kind of got out of control. Like when we look back to the mass monster era, right? I think it was like we mentioned, multifactorial of why. I think just like back then, man, it was like your off season was going hard on food, right? It was like Chad Nichols style, like just massing on a ton of food. Yeah, there was like drugs involved, right, and insulin involved, but I don't think that's a big contributor because even with insulin, you can only take it as much as like to match the food. And if you go higher, you need more food. So I think that's where it becomes problematic. And when you look at these guys that say that, I would look at like you're saying, what's the total situation environment that they're in? Like I've seen Jordan speak to it. I don't want to speak for him, but if I'm correct, I think that's when he was working with Milos and they
Yes,
used a lot of insulin and also a lot of food. That's also in Jordan. I think he said he got to his heaviest around like over 300 pounds.
yes, yes.
He put a lot of size on really quickly, and I'm sure had like a lack of control in the off season of his waist, and that was probably the bigger impactor there versus like insulin was there. Because imagine if Jordan didn't take insulin during that time, his body's still going to have to produce a ton of insulin to cover
Yeah,
that food. So insulin in and of itself is not contributing to like more organ growth per se. It has more of a permissive role in growth. So insulin kind of opens the gate, but you need all the food there to kind of drive the process to grow. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is what I will really believe, just because even Jordan says that he have to eat like a pancakes and stuff like that. Basically, he over it a lot. Like to the
yeah,
point started to hate his food, and he to this point says that he never touched the pancake again. So yeah, so this is
do you
probably
think
the most.
that's an old thought? Because it used to say like, yeah, man, off season you need to eat and you're gonna get uncomfortable, feel like you're having to like choke food down and then you just keep going. That's used to how I was told off season would be to get really big. Do you think that thought has changed? That there's more focus on like, hey, no, you should always have some hunger in the off season, or is that a
Definitely, but I think that is not, in the most case, is not the best. Just because I started to see that the younger guys who are really barely eating, trying to stay as lean as possible. I've always says to my guys that if you are building the base, we can afford to be in a slightly higher surplus because it's probably going to help you lift more because you have more cushioning and it's like a better leverage to the on the training to lift more weight, so it's probably going to be like a helping you to grow. But if you are a guy who's really established, have a lot of mass, and wanted to even jump over the weight class or something like that, but keep the possibilities of the growth to the maximum, it's really important to stay rather lean, on the leaner side. I would say like maybe over a 500 to 1,000 calories surplus. It's totally enough. And I would say not even every day, but do something like a slightly like a rotation that you may be like in a slight bigger surplus on the training days, and maybe even on a deficit on a maintenance on the rest days. So if you added up the whole week and divided by seven, the average is that you are like in a surplus, but not every day, because the insulin sensitivity factor uh, in a guy who is in a positive like nitrogen balance, let's say, so using PEDs and stuff like that is really not have. I don't believe that you have to eat over like a thousand 500 1,500 calories or something like that surplus daily. This is not productive. I don't think so.
Yeah, I think with having some fat gain is absolutely acceptable. You can diet it off, right? It's like even myself, like I try to make sure I gain like about half a kilo per week to ensure is like progress is going to happen because if, especially the guys that have like variable schedules, right? Like have guys that are like, man, I had really active job at work this week, and now if that surplus is so small, it makes them a deficit for that week. They might have weeks like that where they're not progressing. So
Yeah.
just ensure there's enough surplus there to grow is important. Um, where I see the issues with food is like when my guys, and these are more advanced guys, like getting to a point where we're pushing food, we're like this hunger's gone
Yeah.
and like having to start feeling like they're sick of food and force feeding. I feel like that's the time, even if they're still lean, to pull back. And I've even find like maybe every 2 weeks giving like a low food day, kind of like in prep where you have a refeed day, kind of like a defeed day, to give like for one the psychological break from high food, but also just the digestive break, not fasting or anything like that, just like eating based to your hunger for the day, even for a few days, can do a lot of wonders to keep someone moving in the off season.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I've never done that with myself or with any of my guys, but I like to, for example, after the show, like to bump it up the calories slightly quickly up for 6 to 8 weeks, and then when we go in off season, I decrease the calories.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
I
I see
should
kind of
like
shifting some strength down
yeah,
too.
just because it's gonna level up and stays on a some point. I've always like refers it the surplus to the snowball effect. This is why some guys sometimes wonder why we are cut so many calories and my weights haven't dropped. Just because it's gonna take a while, because it's like you're over the top, and uh, uh, it's take some time to you to get to the point when you are really in a deficit, other than just water and maybe like um, the gut. Uh, the food in your gut and stuff like that, that's gonna create the first drop in the weight, not really body fat, to be honest. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I find like, post show, you have that kind of like higher thermic effect where like guys kind of speed up and they can handle more food, but it slows down at some point when all
Tell me
like gear,
about it.
yeah, yeah. Like, but then gear kind of comes down and everything, and you're right, it starts to like you just require less food because your surplus gets too high. A point that I came to mind here was thyroid, because when I see a lot of guys, they pull thyroid out, and that's when weight can really stick to guys that probably need it in still, and they might need it in all off season, and there is like connection with the thyroid in the gut, And if thyroid function's too low, it impacts digestion as too. Like thyroid is basically like the regulator of metabolic rate of all these
Thermostat,
all
yeah.
organ systems, right? So if thyroid's low, guts motility is going to be slow too. So that can be impactful. So something to consider, like looking at your thyroid and making sure like that's optimized in the off season because that can impacting your digestion too.
Yeah, I've always pulled the labs right after the show, and then after 6 to 8 weeks, and then in the middle on the off season, at least once, probably more, but at least once, depends on how long the off season is. And yeah, we always check it out and react, just because I think that you have to stay on a healthy level throughout the whole year, not only bump it up closer to the show and have fun with your thyroid meds, because most of the guys still thinks about the thyroid medication as like a fat burners, and I hate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's not selective and it's not a fat burner.
I'm the point now. I keep it in year round. I rather have a
Me too.
stable
Me too, yeah.
hormone level than these fluctuations and like seeing if it's going to come back up and then having some months time where I'm low. So I'm point now where I just like keep it in year round.
Only T4 or I'm talking about yourself? T4
Myself.
or combined?
Oh, I'm doing a combo therapy, so I have
Yeah, me
T4 and
too.
T3, but I would say like for sure like T4 or combo. You know.
Yeah, if some guys like can how to say it, like transform? No, that's not the great word,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but
Convert T4
convert,
to
yes,
T3, right?
convert. Great. I've lived only T4, but if there's a higher demands because of PDUs or anything else on the plate, I do the combo therapy. And on myself, I've used 20s, hundreds year round, and that's the not probably closer to the show and bump it up, but always on the physiological level. So I've always check it out after like a 3 to 4 hours after taking the tablets. I check the level of the thyroid, just to keep it on a higher end of spectrum, but not over the top.
I realized now with that, man, I was underdosing my thyroid for a long time. I looked up some medical guidelines as far as like T4 dosing based on body weight, and like they're like work your way up to based on labs, could be like as high as like 1.6 microgram per kilo of body weight,
Yeah,
which 100 kilo could be like 160 micrograms of T4 per day. Now, if you're doing the combo, of course, it'd be lower
yeah,
in four, but it took me like for me, like I'm like 250 right now, and I'm like 155 micrograms of T4 and 30 micrograms of T3 per day, and that keeps me normal in the normal
yeah.
range. But I was like w way underdosing thyroid for a long time.
Can I ask how much GH you use right now?
Yeah, nine IUs.
Okay, I've used 10 year round. So yeah, and 20 hundred is keep me on the higher spectrum. So yeah, I've right now I have a lot more of American clients, and I've realized that getting the blood works, it's not that easy for those guys, because here I can do the blood works whenever I can, even on the Sundays. Some labs
Mm.
are open, so that's not a problem. And it's really cheap for the lab work standards here. So this is not a problem. I can check it even if I wanted to, couple times a week.
Wow.
So this is why I base on the blood works always, because it's easy for us. But for you, over the now you have the Merrick Health and stuff like that, so it's easier. But a couple years ago, that probably was a nightmare to do the blood works. Like you have to get appointment with your doctor, and he had to agree on that, and you have to have a reason why you want it. It's a pain in the ass. I can imagine why some guys in the United States are doing it feel like on a feel, not on the blood works, just because you basically don't have a choice.
That's the reality of coaching. Like
Yeah.
we talk all day about what's good on paper, like check your labs. If you're having estrogen symptoms, like go get your lab
Yeah.
work done. But in the US, like, okay, like by the time I get be able to go to the lab will be in 2 weeks. Then I'll get my results back in 2 weeks. That's 4 weeks later. Like, or if this was on prep, like that's not reasonable. So a lot of times it is just based on feel or implementing an intervention and seeing what the effect was. So that's yeah, the reality of what we're having to do at times. But you're right, it definitely has improved in the US. Canada is still very much like that. It's very hard to
Yeah.
get lab if you have a Canadian client.
I've got one. Yeah. And it's really pain in the ass. And
Australia
yeah,
too.
here you have the blood results in most of the time less than 3 to 4 hours. And you
Wow.
can check it online. You don't have to go for them. You just check it online. You have like your account out there and you have all your history of your labs. So it's really easy. Yeah.
That's
Okay,
nice.
John. Yeah. Thank you so much for being so polite and spending over an 1.5 hour with me talking
Oh yeah,
about
no, I had
weights.
90 minutes in mind, so
So
that was
yeah,
good
so
chatting.
yeah, and I apologize everyone for the lightning issues, but to be honest, I thought that we are not gonna make it today just because I've asked you a long time ago, but I've realized that the time difference. So you probably just not seen the message, and you like 10 minutes before you shoot me the message that yeah we seen each other in a 10 minutes, and I was in a rush and tried to put
Yeah, sorry,
everything.
Dawid.
Not a problem. I
Here,
stay at home all day, so not a problem. But I was in my panties and without a shirt, mess with my head, and everything here is was mess. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so
We'll
this is
we'll
why I
coordinate it
forgot
better. I
about
know
light.
that like here it's like 8:30 in the morning, right? So I think you messaged me. I was asleep, but we'll try to get
Yes.
better. If we do this again, we'll get a better time, huh?
That's perfect time for me. Just I I should ask you yesterday.
It's all
That's
good.
my that's on
You did
mine.
it.
That's on me.
You made it work. It's okay.
Yeah. For everyone who are sticking with us to the end of this podcast, thank you, and I highly recommend it to subscribe to follow the John's sites. Everything that's John has to offer. For example, the coaching course and stuff like that. You can find in the description down below, and it's great. I I'm on it. And you told about the estrogen and the GATs, and this is on the course as well. So if you wanted to know a little bit more about your hormones and how to optimize it and how to work with your clients, assess the clients' check-ins and stuff like that, the everything through the PDUs, the hypertrophy section, how to properly use your movements to help yourself and your clients rather than ruin them. You can find it everything out there, as well as the great forum that you can ask anything basically, and either John or anyone out there who's fairly knowledgeable gonna help you with the answer. So thank you, and that's will probably be the end of this podcast. Thank you, John.
All right. Thank you, Darwin. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.